Hello, this is the third JavaScript video on from the ASIT, and we're going to actually do some coding today, and we're going to look into adding text onto a document, modifying any specific tags using their IDs, and then adding whole new elements or adding whole new tags into the DOM using JavaScript. So, I'm going to go straight into Dreamweaver this time. I've got about a million things open. There we go. So this is what happens when you default to Dreamweaver. When you open Dreamweaver, you get a blank HTML document, which I'm sure you're familiar with. We're going to add a script at the bottom. We did this script before at the end of the last video, but I'll just show you it again anyway. So, oh, my graphics card's stopping working. There we go. Alright, so to add anything to the page, we're going to need to update the DOM, or update the document object model, and to access that we type in document. We can then write. So first, there's loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of methods attached to this document object, and they can all do lots of interesting and useful things. You will not need to know all of these. There are a select few that you'll have to use regularly, and other ones, as long as you can kind of work out what you need and how they work, you should be okay. Like largely for the for the A2, you're doing similar things. You're generally accessing an element, modifying it, checking the contents of it, and things like that. So we're generally going to be using the same methods over and over again. But you can look through this list. If anything looks particularly useful to you, you can have a go with it. Yeah. So anyway, document.write is one of these methods, and essentially what it does is it just adds text without a tag, without any HTML, onto the document in much the same way as you could do like hello world with no tags, and it displays on the page. You're doing essentially that with document.write. So document.write and hello. We'll do hello world because it's programming and every example starts with that. If we save this, even if you just do it in live code view, you can see that this has been added to the page. I'll turn off live code. And again, if you view it in your browser, hello world. Okay, so the other things we said we'd do. Going to modify a specific tag. So in one of the earlier videos I mentioned that you will notice when you're working in JavaScript you see IDs an awful lot. That's because we use IDs to select specific elements in our DOM. So if I had a paragraph, for example, that said, here is some text, and then I close my tag, if I want to change only this text, it's quite hard to single out exactly that paragraph. There are ways of doing it, of sort of iteratively going through each tag and checking, but it's not very efficient and it's a lot more complicated. So if we just give this tag a unique identifier, id equals para1, you can call it whatever you want. There's no set names for IDs. It's entirely for you, the developer, to deal with. And then in here, if I want to change the content of that, I can do document dot get element by ID, and then type in, in here, put in the name of my thing, para1. And then you get properties for it, so dot, I believe it's inner text, no it's not, it's text content. Text content, I can do equals new message. So what this does is, so we get our document, or DOM, and then we call this method that's called getElementById, and it will search the body for an ID that matches para1. When it finds it, it will set its text content to new message. If I save this, my new page will say new message and then hello world underneath. So I can view that in the browser, just like that. So at this point I will explain something that I did in the first lesson. You can put your script tags anywhere you want. And it's quite common to have certain script tags up in the top, like before your head. But there's a problem with this. If I was to move this up here, like can I move it from here? In fact, I'll move all of this. So when I run this, it will say here is some text. Because, I'll explain that in a second, but just check it does this. Here's some text. And if we view the console, you can see that it couldn't set the text content of null. That's a bit jargony at the moment, but basically, and you might have encountered this in GCSE, HTML is added to the page line by line by line by line by line by line. So it'll do this, then 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 it'll do this, and so on and so forth. When we do a script at the start, it'll run the script before the page is loaded. So when we type get element by ID, this element doesn't exist yet because I haven't made it until here. So basically, anytime in JavaScript you want to sort of dynamically add content to a page just when it starts up, like when it loads, you put it at the bottom because that lets it load all your HTML tags, and then it'll load all the HTML tags into your DOM, and then when you get to your script, you can access everything that's there, if that makes sense. So having this down here will then work again. I can get rid of this, save, and come, and there you go. You can see it says new message. So there's other things we can do, and one more thing I'm going to show you. You can also add elements to your DOM, and add elements too. So this is slightly more complicated, and we're going to need to use variables, and we're going to create some vars. So var, we're going to add a new heading, so we'll call it new head equals document dot create element, and we're going to create an h1. So new head is a brand new h1 tag that has not been added to the web page yet. We're then going to create var and head content, which equals document dot text node, create text node, sorry. And in there we're going to put in the text that is our heading. So the text heading is going to be, this is a dynamically added heading. Technically it's not because we've hard coded it, but this is how you would do it. Then, and this is where it continues to get a bit confusing, we need to get our new head that we created earlier, and we append and a child, and that child is the head content. Okay, another thing we're going to probably need to do is add this to a document on the add this to a tag on the page. So what I'm going to do is create a div. Divs are just a method of dividing up your page into parts, and they're initially empty. So I'm going to create a div with an ID which is equal to heading goes here. And if I close this div, it'll appear on my page as nothing. I can do document.get element by ID, and this div has an ID called heading goes here. Oh. And then using the same method, I can append child, and the child is going to be new head. And then press save. If I run this, you will see a new header getting added to the page. So it seems a bit more complicated to do that than some of the other things we've done, but let me just quickly go through this. So essentially, I say essentially far too much. So we've created an empty element on the page that is just going to be a placeholder. And when you see the code for a lot of JavaScript applications, you'll find a lot of empty divs that are added to pages that are purely for putting content in later. In HTML, if we were to put something in here, hello, right, this paragraph is a child element of this div. So anything you do, and this paragraph is a child element of body, and this div is a child element of body, and this is a child element of this. And that's what this append child does. It allows us to take an outer element and put an inner element inside it. So here, we're first of all creating the elements. We're creating an H1, creating the tag. So this line of code essentially, there's that word again, essentially does this. We then make a variable called head content, and head content is just a string like this to be attached to something. I'm going to put this on the clipboard. When we do this new head.append child, we're adding some content to the middle of this. And then the final step, the document.get element by ID, heading goes here, is selecting this div, and it's then appending all of this into here. And that's how that works. And you'll find yourself using this an awful lot. However, mostly you're going to be doing this kind of thing. However, it doesn't hurt to know how to add whole new elements in. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, and we'll continue next time with some variables and adding some actions.